Let me tell you this like I'd tell it to a friend late at night, sitting on a couch with the lights low. It still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Back in 2017, I was doing small modeling jobs on the side. Nothing fancy. I wasn't famous or anything close to it. I just liked posing for photos and making a little extra cash. I'd post my pictures in local online groups around my town of Ridgewater and nearby places. Most of the work came from tiny clothing shops, students learning photography, or people just trying to build a portfolio. It was all pretty harmless. One evening, I got a message from a guy named Marcus Holloway. He said he'd seen my photos online and thought I'd be perfect for a project he was working on. The first thing that caught my attention was the pay. It was way more than I usually made, like enough to make me stop and reread the message twice. Marcus said the shoot was art-focused and edgy but classy. He kept saying it was all about mood and emotion, not anything trashy. I checked his profile before replying. His photos looked real enough. Dark backgrounds, soft lighting, people staring into the camera like they were holding secrets. A few of the pictures were a little revealing, but nothing that screamed danger. I even recognized one of the women in his comments. She lived a few towns over and had worked with lots of photographers. That made me feel better. So I said yes. Marcus sent me the address. It was an old industrial building on the edge of a place called Black Ridge Point. I didn't go there often, but I knew the area had been changing. Old warehouses were turning into art studios and cheap apartments. At least, that's what people said. The shoot was scheduled for a Friday evening. I arrived just as the sun was sinking, turning the sky orange and purple. The building looked rough. Peeling paint, cracked windows. The kind of place that made you double-check your car locks. Still, I told myself not to judge. Some of the best creative spaces looked awful from the outside. I knocked on a big steel door. It opened almost instantly. Marcus stood there smiling like he'd been waiting with his hand on the handle. He looked ordinary. Early 40s, maybe. Thin, scruffy beard, hoodie and worn sneakers. He didn't look threatening at all. If I passed him in a grocery store, I wouldn't remember his face. Inside, the place smelled like dust and cold metal. The main room was large and mostly empty. A few lights on stands. A backdrop hanging crookedly. A couch shoved against the wall that looked like it had been rescued from a dumpster. The floor was concrete, stained and cracked. Sorry about the mess, Marcus said. Still fixing the place up, I shrugged. I'd seen worse. He talked a lot about cameras, about shadows, about how assistants were running late. His voice was calm and friendly, like someone trying a little too hard to seem normal. I set my bag down near a folding chair. I noticed there was no bathroom nearby, no changing room either. That felt strange, but I ignored the thought. Marcus handed me a glass with a red drink in it. Helps people loosen up, he said with a laugh. I didn't want to be rude. I took a small sip. It tasted overly sweet, like syrup. We kept talking. He asked about my hobbies, my family, where I grew up. Then my head started to feel fuzzy, like cotton was stuffed behind my eyes. At first, I thought I was just tired. Then my legs felt weak, my hands trembled. I don't feel so good, I said. Marcus was next to me in seconds, his hand firm on my arm. Sit down, he said softly. You're probably just dehydrated. I barely remember lying back on the couch. The ceiling lights stretched and blurred. My thoughts slid apart like puzzle pieces that wouldn't fit anymore. I remember his face leaning over mine, calm and focused, like he was fixing something broken. Then nothing. When I woke up, I didn't know where I was. It took a moment to realize I couldn't move my arms. Or my legs. My wrists were tied behind my back so tightly they burned. My ankles were bound too. The room was small, no windows, just concrete walls and a single bulb hanging overhead, flickering like it might give up at any second. The air smelled wrong, old, sour, metallic. In front of me was a camera on a tripod. A little red light blinked steadily, like a heartbeat. I looked down and felt my stomach drop. My clothes were gone. I was wearing something thin and unfamiliar that scratched my skin. It wasn't mine. The door creaked open. Marcus walked in, holding a tablet. His friendly smile was gone. His face was empty, almost bored. "You're awake," he said, like he was commenting on the weather. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. He showed me the tablet. Photos. Me on the couch, me unconscious, taken from angles that made my skin crawl. He swiped through them slowly, like he was proud. "If you scream or fight," he said, "these go online, everywhere." I felt sick. Another man came in later. This one was called Jonah. Marcus introduced him like they were co-workers at an office. Jonah barely looked at me. He focused on a laptop, typing, adjusting cables, checking numbers. That's when I realized people were watching. Not later, not someday. Right then. Time stopped making sense after that. I don't know how many days passed. The lights were always on. The camera never stopped blinking. Strange sounds echoed through the building. Distant doors slamming. Voices behind walls. Footsteps overhead. They talked about money like they were selling shoes. They argued about prices, about requests, about clients. They used words that made it all so normal, like it wasn't destroying me piece by piece. If I cried, they ignored it. If I resisted, they tightened the restraints until my hands went numb. Food came in small portions. Water only when they decided I'd earned it. They wanted me tired, quiet, empty. At some point, I stopped screaming. Not because I gave up hope, but because my body couldn't do it anymore. Then one night, everything changed. I heard shouting above us. Loud, angry, heavy boots pounding metal stairs. Marcus froze. Jonah slammed the laptop shut. The door burst open. Police filled the room, shouting commands. The noise was overwhelming. Jonah tried to run. He didn't make it far. Marcus dropped to his knees, hands in the air, babbling excuses. Someone wrapped a blanket around me, cut the ropes, asked me questions I couldn't answer. Outside, the air felt sharp and cold, like breathing for the first time after being buried. Someone told me I was safe. But even now, years later, when I hear a camera click or see a red light blinking in the dark, my chest tightens. Because some things don't end when the door finally opens. I met Evan back in 2014, when we were both killing time at a community workshop on the east side of Ridgewood Falls, a worn-down town that used to have factories before everything dried up. We weren't close friends at first, more like two people who kept ending up at the same places: coffee shops, thrift stores, swap meets. Over time, we just sort of stuck. Evan had this thing about old technology. Not the cool vintage stuff people post online, but the truly dead junk. The kind most people wouldn't even touch. Broken radios with cracked dials. Computers so old the plastic had turned yellow and brittle. He'd dig through flea markets and storage unit auctions like a raccoon in a dumpster, pulling out pieces nobody else wanted. I wasn't related to him. We weren't best friends either. More like uneasy companions. I helped him sometimes because I felt bad watching him dig alone, and because he paid for dinner afterward. Still, there was something off about how focused he got. When Evan locked on to something, the rest of the world faded away. You could say his name 3 times, and he wouldn't hear you. He rented a workspace in a half-dead office building on the edge of town. The kind of place where only one elevator worked, and even that one groaned like it was in pain. The hallway smelled like mold and old paper. Flickering lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were stained with dark streaks that looked like they'd been there for decades. Evan loved it there. His room was packed tight. Shelves bowed under the weight of spare parts. Old monitors stacked like tombstones. Wires curled across the floor like sleeping snakes. It always smelled like melted plastic and metal dust. If you stayed too long, your head started to hurt. One night, just after midnight, Evan sent me a message that read, "You gotta see this. Please." I figured he'd found another useless circuit board or some corrupted hard drive. Still, curiosity got me. I drove over. When I walked in, he was sitting inches from his monitor, not blinking. The only light in the room came from the screen, and it painted his face in this sick, pale glow. His eyes were wide, and his mouth hung open just a little. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just scrolled. The screen was full of text, not code, not manuals. Lists, names, dates, coordinates. Some files looked like blueprints, but not for anything normal. No radios, no computers. These were weapons. Crude, homemade things that looked like they were designed by someone who'd learned engineering the hard way. The drawings were messy, like they'd been scanned from notebooks, notes scribbled in the margins. Some words were scratched out so hard the paper had torn. Evan was smiling. "Isn't this wild?" he said. "Someone dumped an entire archive online. I got it for almost nothing." I told him it looked fake, like one of those scare folders people pass around online to mess with each other. He nodded, but didn't really listen. He kept clicking deeper, opening folders inside folders, like he was tunneling into something alive. After a while, the room felt colder, not temperature-wise, just wrong, like the air was heavy. I left after a couple of hours. He didn't even notice. A few nights later, Evan showed up at my apartment without calling. It was almost 3 a.m. He looked terrible. Hair greasy, eyes red, hands shaking so badly he dropped his keys twice. He said someone had called him. Blocked number. No name. Just a voice that sounded calm and tired, like it had done this before. "Stop digging," the voice said. "Forget the files." Evan tried to laugh it off, but his laugh cracked halfway through. He told me he'd found chat logs buried deep in the archive. Encrypted conversations. People talking about shipments, materials, names that didn't show up in normal searches. He said some of the usernames were still active. "This isn't old stuff," he whispered. "They're still doing it." We met the next day at a run-down diner called Marla's, a place where the vinyl seats stuck to your skin and the coffee tasted burnt no matter how fresh it was. Evan kept watching the door. Every time it opened, his shoulders tensed. He told me he'd been messaging someone from a parts forum, an anonymous account. The person claimed to have a rare military-grade processor Evan had been searching for years. Something that shouldn't be floating around civilian spaces. But the seller also knew about the archive. They wanted to meet. I begged him not to go. I told him this wasn't a hobby anymore. This was dangerous. Evan promised he'd be careful. Said he'd record everything. Said he'd walk away if anything felt off. That night, he sent me a location pin. An abandoned industrial lot near Blackwater Junction, just outside town. He told me to wait an hour. If I didn't hear back, I was supposed to come find him. The hour passed. Then another 10 minutes. I drove out there with my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The lot was dead silent. Broken pavement, rusted fences. One streetlight flickering like it was about to give up. Evan's car was there, parked crooked. Driver's door open. No Evan. I found a torn plastic bag near an old warehouse door. Inside were smashed electronic parts, bent metal, cracked boards. Nearby, dark stains soaked into the concrete. Blood. The police called it a robbery gone wrong. No suspects, no cameras. No witnesses. A week later, they found Evan behind a strip mall, dumped like trash. His face was barely recognizable. They only knew it was him because of his watch. A month after the funeral, I got an email from an address made of random letters and numbers. No subject. No message. Just a photo. Evan's shirt. The one he wore that night. Bloody. Crumpled. Someone had taken the picture before the police ever found him. I still have the archive. I never open it. Sometimes, late at night, my computer wakes up on its own. The screen lights up. And for just a second, I swear I see folders opening by themselves. Like something's checking to see if I'm still curious. And maybe waiting for me to make the same mistake. Back in 2017, my cousin Evan was living in a small town called Ridgewood Falls, a kind of place where nothing exciting ever happens, and everyone knows when you buy new tires. Evan wasn't doing great financially. He worked long hours at a roadside garage, fixing beat-up cars and installing tracking devices for delivery companies. It paid the bills barely, but it didn't leave room for surprises. And his laptop dying was definitely a surprise. It didn't just die all at once. For months, the screen flickered like it was blinking at him. The battery would drop from full to dead in 10 minutes. Sometimes it made a faint whining noise, like something inside it was tired. Then one morning, Evan pressed the power button, and nothing happened. No light, no sound. Just dead plastic and silence. He needed a laptop for work. Invoices, maps, software installs, all of it. Buying a new one wasn't even close to possible, so he started scrolling through second-hand listings late at night, half asleep, hoping for a miracle. That's when he found it. The listing was strange right away. No long description. Just a few blurry photos and a short line, barely used. Works perfect. Need gone fast. The price was way lower than it should have been. Almost suspiciously low. Evan hesitated. Then he told himself he was overthinking it. Some people just needed quick cash. The seller messaged back almost instantly and suggested meeting at the Maple Way grocery parking lot, just off the highway. They agreed on a time. Early evening, still light out. The guy showed up exactly on time. Evan later told me the first thing he noticed was how tense the guy looked. He was tall, wearing a gray jacket with the hood pulled low, even though it wasn't cold. He kept shifting his weight, scanning the lot like he expected someone to run up at any second. The seller barely made eye contact. "Everything works," the guy said quickly, opening the laptop just long enough to show the login screen. "I reset it already." Evan asked a few basic questions, but the guy's answers were short and rushed. He kept glancing toward the road. Evan assumed the guy was just nervous. Meeting strangers with cash always feels weird. They exchanged money and charger. The seller muttered something like, "Don't mess with the files," and corrected himself and said, enjoy it." After that, he walked fast toward a side street and disappeared between two buildings. Evan shrugged it off. At home, everything looked fine. The laptop booted clean. No photos, no documents, no saved accounts. It felt brand new. Evan relaxed. He even laughed at himself for being paranoid. That didn't last long. While setting up his desktop, he noticed a single folder sitting there, plain and gray, named Cs_patch_old. He tried to delete it. The laptop froze. After a few seconds, an error message appeared saying the folder was currently in use. That made no sense. He opened it. Empty. Or at least it looked empty. When he checked the folder's details, the size didn't match. It was holding something. A lot of something. Evan felt a small chill crawl up his arms. He used a file viewer to force it open. Inside was another folder. Then another. Buried layers deep, he found an encrypted file. No name, just a long string of numbers, Curiosity beat common sense. It took him hours to break into it. When it finally opened, Evan said he felt sick almost immediately. There were lists, names with numbers beside them, locations marked with dates, messages that read like casual conversations, except the words were wrong. Phrases like drop confirmed, asset moved, and cleanup finished. Then came the videos, security footage, parking garages, empty warehouses, people meeting for seconds at a time, exchanging bags, shaking hands, faces blurred, but the body language cold and rehearsed. Photos came next. Fake IDs, passports, surveillance shots of people who clearly didn't know they were being watched. And then there were the other pictures. People lying still, eyes open, skin pale, some with injuries that made Evan slam the laptop shut and throw up in his sink. He didn't sleep that night. He told himself he'd ignore it. He didn't want to know. He didn't want to be involved. He planned to use the laptop only for work and pretend the folder didn't exist. But the laptop wouldn't let him. The folder kept coming back. He'd delete it. It would reappear. He'd hide it. It would show up again. Sometimes the screen would flicker and make a soft clicking noise, like someone tapping a fingernail against glass from the inside. Once, while Evan was brushing his teeth, the laptop turned on by itself in the other room. Another time, his browser opened to a foreign forum filled with symbols he couldn't read. One post was highlighted, blinking slowly, like it was waiting. The emails started the next morning. Dozens of them, no names. Just random addresses. The messages were short. You have something that isn't yours. Fix this. You are running out of time. Some emails included screenshots, his desktop, his messages with his girlfriend, his bank account balance. One included a photo of him asleep on his couch. That's when he really panicked. Evan changed passwords, shut down accounts, wiped the laptop again, even smashed his old phone and bought a cheap burner. It didn't help. The messages kept coming, then they changed. They didn't want the files deleted. They wanted Evan to help them. Simple favors, pickups, drop-offs, no questions. When he ignored them, they sent photos of his little sister walking her dog, his uncle locking up the garage at night. The last message before everything went dark said only one word: choose. Evan tried reaching out to someone he trusted, an old customer who worked in digital security. He typed the message, hit send, and watched his phone lose signal completely. That night, walking home, Evan cut through an alley he'd used 100 times before. A van was waiting. No headlights. Engine running. 2 men grabbed him. No yelling. No threats. Just force. What happened next left him with scars he'll carry forever. He survived. Barely. When he woke up in the hospital days later, the laptop was gone. The emails were gone. The folder never came back. No one ever contacted him again. But Evan still sleeps with the lights on. He still jumps when his phone buzzes. And he never, ever buys used electronics. Because sometimes you don't buy a device. Sometimes you inherit someone else's nightmare. It started back in 2016, in a small town called Red Hollow, the kind of place where everyone knows your car before they know your name. I was living alone in a narrow upstairs apartment above a closed-down bakery. The building always smelled faintly like old sugar and damp wood, especially when it rained. My name's Evan, and the person who ruined my life was Marla. Marla wasn't my friend from childhood or anything like that. She was my older cousin, the kind everyone in the family admired. She worked in cybersecurity, or at least that's what she told people. She dressed sharp, talked fast, and always seemed 10 steps ahead of everyone else. At family gatherings, adults leaned in when she spoke. Kids thought she was cool. I trusted her because, honestly, I didn't think I had a reason not to. She stayed with me for a few weeks after moving back to Red Hollow. Said she needed somewhere quiet to work on remote contracts. Most nights, she sat at my kitchen table with her laptop open, the screen glowing blue against the walls. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and see light leaking under my bedroom door. Hear the soft click of keys, steady and patient, like she was counting something. One evening, while we were eating leftover pizza, she said, "You really should lock down your computer better." I laughed and told her I barely used it for anything serious. Emails, videos, bills, normal stuff. That's exactly why, she said. Regular people get targeted the most. She offered to install something that would clean up my digital footprint. Her words, not mine. She said it would make my internet traffic harder to track, protect my identity, keep strangers from snooping. I didn't argue. She was the expert. I was just the guy living above a dead bakery. She took my laptop and told me not to touch it for a bit. I watched from the couch as lines of text scrolled down the screen. Commands, numbers, things I didn't recognize. Every now and then, the fan inside my laptop whined louder, like it was breathing too hard. When she finished, she smiled and said, "You're safer now." That night, I slept badly. I kept dreaming that someone was standing in the corner of my room, just out of sight, breathing slowly. When I woke up, my laptop was open on the kitchen table, screen black, warm to the touch. At first, everything seemed fine. Days passed. Then I noticed my computer felt tired. That's the best way I can explain it. Simple things took longer. Pages loaded like they were dragging their feet. Sometimes the cursor froze for a second, then jumped ahead, like it was trying to catch up with something unseen. When I mentioned it, Marla waved her hand. That's normal. Security takes effort. Think of it like locking extra doors. A week later, I started hearing sounds at night, soft clicks. Not from my apartment, but from inside the walls. At first, I blamed the pipes. Old building, old noises. But the sounds had a rhythm. Click, pause. Click, click, pause. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and poked around the system settings. I found logs filled with activity that didn't match anything I remembered doing. Connections opening and closing. Data moving in chunks. Addresses that meant nothing to me. When I asked her, she didn't even look up from her coffee. Background routing, she said. Totally normal. Then the money started showing up. The first deposit was $240, labeled with a string of numbers instead of a name. Then another a few days later, and another. Small amounts, but enough to notice. Enough to feel wrong. Marla didn't look surprised at all. That's just profit sharing, she said. Your system's helping out with a few things. It's passive. You're not doing anything. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. Still, I didn't push. Part of me didn't want to know. Another part was scared that if I asked too many questions, I'd hear answers I couldn't undo. By the end of the month, my apartment felt different, heavier. The air felt thick, like before a storm. My laptop fan ran even when the lid was closed. Sometimes I swore I could hear faint voices through my headphones, low and distorted, like a radio tuned just off the right station. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on my door at 7:12 in the morning. 2 men and a woman stood outside, badges out, faces blank. They said my name like it tasted bad. At the station in Grayford, they showed me printouts. Pages and pages of activity tied directly to my internet connection. Black market forums, stolen identities. Things I don't even like to name out loud. They talked calmly, but their eyes never left my face. I told them I didn't understand, that my cousin had installed security software, that I barely knew how to change my password. They didn't care. To them, the trail stopped with me. When I called Marla from the parking lot, she didn't answer. When she finally picked up, her voice sounded distant, like she was already far away. She listened, said nothing, then promised to call me back. She never did. The next day, my apartment filled with strangers in gloves. They took everything: laptop, hard drives, phone, even an old USB stick I hadn't touched in years. As they carried my things out, I noticed Marla's room was empty. Clothes gone, laptop gone. No sign she'd ever been there. It took weeks to learn the truth. The software wasn't protection. It was a doorway, a tunnel. Everything done through it wore my name like a mask. The money was payment. Proof in neat little deposits that I was involved. On paper, I wasn't a victim. I was a partner. People stopped talking to me. Whispers followed me in grocery stores. My landlord avoided eye contact. At night, I still hear the clicks in the walls, even though the apartment is empty now. Marla was never found. Sometimes, when I check my bank account, I swear I see new transactions appear for just a second before vanishing. And sometimes, late at night, my phone lights up with a notification that disappears before I can read it. I don't think she ever stopped using me. I think she just learned how to do it from farther away. I still remember the year like it was burned into my head. It was 2016, the kind of year where everything felt a little off even before things went wrong. I'm Lena, and this is about my younger cousin Milo. He lived with me back then because his parents were working overseas. I was supposed to be the responsible one, the adult, the one keeping an eye on him. I failed. Milo was 15, skinny, quiet, and always hunched over some kind of screen. Laptop, phone, tablet, didn't matter. If it had pixels, he loved it. We lived in a small rental house on the edge of Greydock, a tired little riverside town that smelled like wet concrete and old leaves. Not much happened there. That's what made everything feel safe. Too safe. Milo was obsessed with computer games. Not just playing them, but watching other people play. Streams, forums, videos that went on for hours. He talked nonstop about frame rates, graphics cards, cooling systems. Stuff I barely understood. He'd get this excited shine in his eyes and say things like, "If I had a real setup, Lena, it'd be so smooth." Like butter. We couldn't afford any of that. I worked long shifts at a print shop, barely keeping the lights on. Milo knew that. He never begged, never whined. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, I get it," but I could tell it hurt. One afternoon, he came home and announced he'd found a job, delivering flyers around neighborhoods near Old Quarry Road. It paid almost nothing, but he acted like it was a big deal. He'd come back sweaty and exhausted, shoes dusty, hands smelling like ink. I was proud of him. I really was. Then things started getting weird. After a few weeks, Milo stopped complaining about being broke. He stopped counting coins on his desk. One night, I noticed a messy stack of cash shoved under his keyboard. Not pocket change. Actual bills. I asked him about it. "Oh, he said, scratching his neck. "Extra work. What kind of work?" "Just online stuff." That answer felt wrong in my gut, like a cold stone dropping into my stomach. Soon after, he showed up with a brand new mechanical keyboard, the kind that clicks loud and shiny like it belongs in a tech store display. I knew exactly how much those cost. When I asked how he paid for it, he didn't meet my eyes. "Freelance," he said. Helping people. Helping people how?" He never really answered. That's when I noticed his phone. New apps I'd never seen before. Blank icons. Weird names made of letters and numbers. Nothing you could search in an app store. When I asked about those, he laughed too fast. Client stuff. His hand tightened around the phone. His thumb hovered over the screen like he was ready to lock it at any second. I told myself not to be paranoid. Teenagers hide things. That's normal, right? But the house started feeling different. At night, I'd hear soft notification sounds from his room. Not game sounds, not music, just short, sharp tones. Sometimes his bedroom light would flick on at 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd walk past and hear him whispering, voice low and rushed. One night, I heard him say, "I already told you, I can handle it." That sent a shiver straight up my spine. Whenever I asked who he was talking to, he smiled that same tight smile. Just friends. But he didn't look relaxed. He looked scared. He started leaving the house at odd hours. Always with that old black backpack. Always saying he'd be back soon. He'd glance over his shoulder before stepping outside, like he expected someone to be standing right behind him. The air around him felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. The night everything ended started out painfully normal. It was early fall, cold wind. The river near Blackwater Pier was high and loud, slapping against the concrete. Milo said he had to drop something off, just a quick thing. An hour, he promised. I told him it was late. He shrugged. I do this all the time. He left before I could argue. An hour passed. Then 2. I texted him. Nothing. I called. Straight to voicemail. By midnight, the house felt hollow. Every little sound made me jump. The refrigerator hum sounded like breathing. The wind rattled the windows like fingers tapping. I stayed up until morning, sitting on the couch, phone in my hand. When the sun came up and Milo still wasn't home, I went to the police station in Ridgefield, hands shaking the whole time. I felt stupid, embarrassed, like I was wasting their time. They told me teens run off sometimes, but Milo wasn't that kind of kid. That afternoon, an officer called me back. They'd found a backpack near the river, black, torn strap, mud on the bottom. I already knew. Inside was Milo's ID, his phone. The screen was cracked like spider webs, completely dead. They searched the river for hours. When they finally pulled his body out near Blackwater Pier, tangled in rusted shopping carts and branches, I couldn't breathe. I swear the world went quiet, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. The police dug into his phone and laptop. They found messages hidden behind layers of encryption, short commands, drop-off points, payment confirmations, no names, just symbols and codes. Milo had been running packages, quiet ones, no questions asked. The apps he used weren't normal apps. They didn't exist on regular networks. They were shadows of shadows, places where people spoke in fragments and never used real words. The scariest part? Someone wiped everything clean within hours of Milo's death. Messages gone, accounts erased, like he'd never existed online at all. The police said whoever was behind it knew exactly what they were doing. Milo didn't fight. There were no broken bones, no signs of a struggle, just water in his lungs and a thin red mark around his neck. A plastic zip tie. Quick, quiet, professional. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in his old room. His gaming headset still hangs on the chair. His notebook is open to a page full of sketches for a computer he never got to build. And sometimes, I swear, I hear his keyboard clicking. Slow, careful, like someone else is still using it, waiting. Let me tell you this like I'd tell it to a friend late at night, sitting at a kitchen table with the lights low and the windows dark. This all happened back in 2022, when I was 26 and living alone in a narrow apartment building near the old river docks in a city called Briar Hollow. I worked as a junior developer for a small media company, and after work, I liked to mess around with side projects. Nothing big. Mostly half-finished apps that never went anywhere. One night, while looking for some software tools that might help with a streaming feature I was building, I fell into the usual internet maze. You know the one. Old forums with broken links, GitHub pages that hadn't been updated in years, Telegram channels filled with people arguing about code and politics. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just bored and curious. That's when I found a channel that felt off. It didn't have a name, just a symbol. No welcome message. No pinned rules. The posts weren't technical either. People talked about real freedom and living unseen. They wrote like they were part of something important, serious, almost proud. It reminded me of those groups that pretend they're joking but really aren't. I didn't join at first. I just watched. After a few days, someone messaged me. No username. No profile photo. Just a gray icon and a sentence that said, "You look like someone who wants more than the surface web." Below it was a link. I should have ignored it. I know that now. But I didn't. I clicked. The link dropped me into a private chat. Hundreds of messages were flying past faster than I could read. At first, it looked like every other awful corner of the internet. Insults, bad jokes, people trying to shock each other just for fun, videos of dumb pranks, grainy clips of people yelling at strangers. I muted the chat and let it run in the background while I worked. I figured I'd leave later. A few days went by. Then I noticed the notifications again. The tone had changed. The new videos weren't jokes. They were shaky recordings taken from far away. Someone being screamed at on a sidewalk. A woman chased through a parking garage while the camera laughed. A man shoved to the ground while strangers watched and did nothing. What bothered me most was how familiar everything looked. Street signs, bus stops, a coffee shop I passed every morning. One video even showed the cracked mural near my apartment building. The timestamps were recent. These weren't old clips pulled from somewhere else. I started to feel that tight feeling in my chest, like when you realize you've walked into the wrong room and everyone has gone quiet. Then the chat started celebrating. People typed things like clean hit and easy target. Others asked where the next one would be. Someone uploaded screenshots of private messages, bragging about how they tricked people into meeting up. They pretended to be old classmates, rideshare drivers, ticket sellers. Friendly faces hiding sharp teeth. One clip showed a guy being dragged toward a car. I closed the app before it finished. I didn't post. I didn't react. I told myself I could just stay invisible until I left. That's when the moderators noticed me. They didn't announce themselves. They just appeared in conversations, asking quiet questions, watching who talked and who didn't. After a week, my inbox opened on its own with a new message. "Why so quiet, Eli?" Seeing my name there made my stomach flip. I hadn't told anyone my name. The message continued. No greeting, no emoji, just words. Quiet people make us nervous. Quiet people watch. I didn't answer right away. I sat there, staring at the screen, listening to the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside my window. Another message popped up. "If you leave without helping, we remember." I felt trapped, like a mouse realizing the walls weren't walls at all. I replied and said I'd been busy with work, that I'd post something soon. They didn't respond. The next day, they tagged me in the main chat. Hundreds of eyes turned toward my name. They told everyone I was on a trial period. 24 hours to prove I belonged. I panicked. I scrolled through my phone. hands shaking, looking for anything that might fit. I found an old clip from a music festival where a drunk guy was screaming at security. I posted it with a mean caption I didn't really believe. A moderator reacted with a checkmark. The chat moved on. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I woke up to another message. This one was longer. It listed people I knew. My sister, Mara. My coworker, Jonah. My old roommate from college. Links to their profiles. Photos. Notes about where they worked. They'd be disappointed, a message said. But we won't tell them. As long as you're useful. I felt cold all over, like the room had lost its heat. I tried to back away, type something about being sick. The reply came instantly. Sick people talk. And they sent a screenshot of my company's website. My face, my job title, my direct phone number circled in red. Loyalty is simple, they wrote. Don't make us test it. I shut everything down. Phone off, laptop closed, router unplugged. I sat in the dark, listening to the building creak and the pipes knock. Every sound felt too loud. It didn't help. Texts came from unknown numbers. Emails landed in my personal and work inbox. Photos of my apartment building taken from across the street. One picture showed my bedroom light on. I deleted my accounts, but it felt pointless. Like erasing chalk after someone already memorized the words. That night, my doorbell rang. No one ever came by unannounced. My phone buzzed. Open up. Another message followed. We can hear you breathing. When I cracked the door open, the hallway was empty. On the floor sat a small USB drive and a printed photo of me unlocking my car that afternoon. I packed a bag and left town before sunrise. I'll tell it the way I tell it to people now, late at night, when the lights are low and no one is in a hurry to interrupt. It happened years ago, back in 2014, in a town most people forget exists. I won't use the real name. I'll call it Red Hollow. It was the kind of place where warehouses sat half empty, and the streets went quiet after sunset. I was 22 then, freshly fired from my job at a thrift outlet after the company restructured, which is a nice way of saying they didn't need me anymore. For weeks, I lived on my phone and laptop. Job boards, classified ads, community forums, anything that might keep the lights on and the rent paid. I didn't care what the work was. I would have scrubbed floors with a toothbrush if it meant I could stay in my apartment. That's when I found the post. It was wedged between ads for dog walking and piano lessons. The title just said, Web Models Wanted. No logo. No company name. Just a promise of flexible hours, same-day pay, and total privacy. The money listed was ridiculous. Way more than I'd ever made folding clothes or ringing up customers. I remember laughing and thinking it had to be fake. Some scam. Or maybe one of those influencer things where you smile at a camera and talk about makeup. There was nothing in the post that said adult. Nothing obvious anyway, so I messaged them. The reply came fast. Too fast. The person said their name was Martin, though it felt like a name someone picked off the top of their head. He asked if I'd ever done streaming or webcam work before. I said no. I said I was just good at talking to people and not shy on camera. That was enough. He told me they had a studio already set up, so I wouldn't need equipment. No fees, no contracts at first. Just come in, do a test shift, and get paid that night. When I asked directly if it was adult work, he didn't answer straight. He said the content was tailored to comfort and client-driven. Those words should have scared me. But fear sounds different when rent is late. The next afternoon, I took the bus to the address he sent. It was in an industrial stretch outside town, where the roads cracked and weeds grew through the pavement. The building sat between a closed print shop and a tire warehouse. No sign, just a gray door with peeling paint. Inside, The air was thick and sweet, like someone had dumped too much air freshener into a moldy room. The space was small, curtains instead of walls, black paint everywhere, chipped and uneven, cameras perched on cheap tripods, a platform barely big enough to stand on, a makeup table with flickering bulbs that buzzed softly. Martin was there waiting for me. He looked ordinary. That was the worst part. Early 40s, soft voice, neat clothes, the kind of guy you wouldn't remember 5 minutes after meeting him. He smiled a lot. Not warm, practiced. He showed me how everything worked, where to sit, which buttons to press, what messages looked like when they came in. He said the system was locked down, private, safe. Only paying viewers could see anything. He said it the way people say things they've said 1,000 times before. The first sessions were boring, honestly. I talked. I smiled. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. People tipped for tiny things. A wave, a blown kiss, changing sweaters. I kept my rules firm. Nothing weird. Nothing I couldn't explain if someone I knew ever found out. And the money showed up in my account every night, just like he promised. After a few days, I stopped feeling nervous. I even started feeling relieved, like I'd found a loophole in life. Easy work, easy cash, no boss breathing down my neck. But there were little things, small things that stuck with me. Martin never left the room completely. He lingered behind the curtains. I could hear him breathing sometimes. I told myself I was imagining it. Then one night, a message popped up from a user with no name. Just numbers. The message was blunt. Strip. Triple pay. I ignored it. It came again. And again. Martin leaned in close and whispered that I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to. But he also said private viewers paid better. Much better. I said no. After that, the room felt colder. Not temperature cold. The kind that crawls under your skin. Suddenly, some messages jumped to the top of the screen. New rules, Martin said. Priority clients. Special access. Some messages didn't even come through the normal system. They appeared in a separate window I hadn't seen before. Those messages were darker, meaner. They didn't flirt. They demanded. If I refused, my pay dropped. When I asked why, Martin smiled and talked about performance scores and engagement levels. It sounded like nonsense, but the result was real. Less money. Fewer hours. I told myself I'd quit soon. Just one more week. Just enough to catch up. Then someone asked me to wear the same dress I'd worn on my first day. Same shoes. Same hairstyle. I froze. I had never mentioned that outfit. I never talked about my first shift. Somehow, they knew. When I brought it up, Martin said that client was important and worth keeping happy. That was when it hit me. It didn't matter if I left. My image was already out there, stored, saved, watched. The next time I came in, Martin had a piece of paper waiting. A contract. 1 page, vague words, exclusive rights. Preferred clients. I said I needed time. His smile vanished. He told me they'd invested in me, that walking away wouldn't be clean. When I asked what that meant, he said they had footage. Enough to ruin me. I laughed nervously and said I'd never done anything bad. He said it didn't matter. Editing could make anything look worse. That night, I got an email. No subject. Just a link. Inside were screenshots. Some harmless. Some twisted just enough to look wrong. Captions describing things I never did. Names of people I loved listed like targets. The message was short. Do what we say, so I went back. After that, things changed fast. Private sessions only. Clients who spoke like they owned me. Requests that crept past my limits inch by inch. Every time I pushed back, Martin reminded me what would happen. He knew my address. He had my ID. He said disappearing would only make things louder. I started noticing a car parked near my place. A dark sedan. Same spot. Same time. Sometimes someone sat inside, never looking at me. Always there. One night, a client sent a script. He wanted me to read it. It described my apartment in detail. The hallway. The bathroom. The smell of my shampoo. I changed my locks the next day. Martin laughed when I told him. Then came the order. Not a request. A meeting. In person. I said no. Martin showed me a video instead. My younger cousin, walking home from school. Filmed from across the street. I went. After that, the fear changed. It settled. Heavy. Permanent. I stopped fighting. I showed up. I did what they asked. The threats faded because they didn't need them anymore. It only ended because someone nearby noticed the traffic. Too many men. Too many late nights. Police showed up one evening. They found me and 2 others locked in a back room. Martin was gone. The equipment gone. The money gone. The police listened. They said it was bigger than one studio. Bigger than one town? Even now, years later, I keep my curtains closed. I jump when my phone buzzes. I'm going to tell you this the way it actually felt, not the clean version I give doctors or police. This happened in 2016 in a small place called Briar Hollow, a kind of town where nothing ever makes the news, and people think that means nothing bad ever happens. I was living with my nephew Evan back then. His mom, my sister Marla, worked nights at the hospital 2 towns over. So most of the time, it was just me and him in that creaky old house at the edge of Maple Ridge Road. I wasn't his parent. I was the cool aunt, the one who didn't worry too much. Or at least, I thought I was. Evan was 10. Quiet kid, skinny. Always looked like he was listening to something you couldn't hear. When he wasn't at school, he was glued to his tablet. He could sit for hours on the couch, legs tucked under him, eyes locked on the screen, barely blinking. Sometimes I'd say his name 2 or 3 times before he even noticed I was there. I didn't think it was a problem. Kids disappear into games all the time, right? As long as he did his homework and ate something other than cereal, I let it go. Gaming was his safe place. He didn't get into trouble. He didn't sneak out. He didn't fight with other kids. The screen made him calm. And in that house, calm felt like a gift. One night, while I was burning grilled cheese in the kitchen, Evan came running in like he'd just won the lottery. He was smiling so hard, his cheeks looked sore. He held out his tablet with both hands and said, "Aunt Lila, can you help me with something? Please?" He told me about this thing called a mod. Said everyone at school was using it. Said it made the game better, smoother, more fun, new levels, special items, stuff you couldn't get otherwise. He promised it wasn't cheating, just an add-on, just something extra. He kept saying, "If I don't have it, I won't fit in." That sentence should have stopped me cold. But I was tired, hungry, and distracted by a pan hissing on the stove. I glanced at the screen, saw a bunch of buttons and pop-ups I didn't understand, and just followed his instructions. Tap here. Allow this. Accept that. The install bar filled up. Done. Evan hugged me like I'd saved his life. I remember laughing and telling him not to stay up too late. If I'd slowed down, if I'd read even one warning, if I'd asked where the file came from. But I didn't. A few days later, Evan started talking about someone new in his game. He called him Uncle Ray. Not my uncle, not his, just Uncle Ray. Evan said he was really nice. Said he helped him learn secret tricks. Said he gave him rare items and tons of in-game money. I remember teasing him, saying, "Wow, wish someone would give me free stuff." But inside, something felt off. I asked if Uncle Ray was someone he knew in real life. Evan shrugged and said, "He just talks to me in the game. And sometimes on voice." I told myself it was fine. Games had chat features. Lots of adults played. I didn't want to be the paranoid adult who ruins everything. Then the package showed up. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, dropped on our porch in a plain brown box. No return address. Evan's name written neatly on the label, like someone had practiced it. That made my skin prickle. Evan acted like this was totally normal. Said it was a prize. Said Uncle Ray sent it as a surprise. The box was heavier than it looked. When I opened it, there was this black device inside. Smooth, cold, no logo, no instructions. Just a single blinking light that turned on by itself. Evan told me it would make the internet faster. Said Uncle Ray promised it would stop lag and make the game feel more real. How does he know where we live? I asked. Evan stared at the floor and mumbled something about typing it in once. That night, when the house was quiet and the walls made their usual settling noises, I plugged the device in. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe, or guilt, or just not wanting to admit I was scared. The light blinked slowly, like a heartbeat. Nothing exploded. No alarms went off. The internet worked. So I left it. That's when the phone calls started. Always late, always silent. Different numbers every time. No one breathing. No clicking. Just nothing. Like someone was holding the line open, waiting to see if I'd say hello. Evan changed after that. He stayed up later, whispered into his headset with his door shut. When I opened it, he'd jump like I'd caught him doing something wrong. He said Uncle Ray was teaching him advanced stuff. Said he was lucky. One night, I walked past his room and heard laughter coming from the tablet. Low, adult, not Evan's. I didn't sleep much after that. The worst part came when I saw the pictures. I was folding laundry when Evan's tablet lit up on the coffee table. A message preview popped up, and for a second, my brain couldn't understand what I was seeing. It was our house. The front porch, the dent in the mailbox, the crack in the driveway shaped like a lightning bolt. I grabbed the tablet and scrolled. There were dozens of photos. Our living room from the corner near the ceiling. Evan asleep in his bed. Me standing at the stove, hair messy, wearing that stupid old sweater I only wore at home. Some photos were taken from outside, others from inside, some from angles that shouldn't have been possible. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the tablet. I shut off the Wi-Fi, yanked the black device out of the wall, told Evan the internet was done for a while. He screamed, cried, said I didn't understand, said Uncle Ray would be mad. That sentence chilled me more than anything else. The next day, I came home early. The house was silent, too silent. Evan wasn't there. His shoes were by the door, his backpack untouched, his tablet on the counter, screen still glowing. There was a message waiting. Relax, he's safe. For now. I don't remember much after that. Calling the police. Talking and crying at the same time. Watching strangers walk through our house, touching things, asking questions I couldn't answer. The messages kept coming. Calm, polite, cold. Asking for money I didn't have. Promising things I didn't want to imagine. They found Evan 6 days later in an abandoned house outside Coldwater Junction, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like mold and gasoline. He wouldn't talk, wouldn't look at anyone. Just stared at the wall like he was still watching a screen, only he could see. The police said the mod opened a door into our home. Cameras, network, everything? They said Uncle Ray wasn't one person, but part of a group. They said this happens more than people think. Evan lives with his mom now. He doesn't play games anymore. He sleeps with the lights on. And me? I still unplug my router every... Back in 2012, I lived in a quiet little place called Briar Hollow, one of those towns where nothing ever really happens, and everyone pretends that's a good thing. I was renting half of a small duplex with my cousin Evan. We grew up together, same schools, same bad habits, same bad ideas. Living together felt normal. Safe, even. Evan had always loved fireworks. I don't mean the normal kind of love, like, oh cool, pretty colors. I mean, fireworks were his whole personality. Every New Year's Eve, every 4th of July, even random weekends in the middle of March, he'd be outside setting things off. Big ones. Loud ones. Ones that made dogs howl and car alarms chirp for no reason. At first, it was honestly kind of fun. He didn't buy the cheap fireworks you get from roadside tents. He ordered stuff online. Boxes would show up almost weekly. He watched tutorial videos late into the night, pausing and rewinding like he was studying for a test. He kept a thick notebook full of messy drawings, arrows, numbers, and notes written in different colored pens. He said it was his design book. Evan talked about starting his own fireworks business one day. Just small shows, backyard parties, weddings, county fairs, nothing sketchy. He'd grin when he talked about it, eyes lighting up like a kid planning the world's biggest birthday party. At the beginning, everything he used was legal. He made sure of that. He liked reminding me of it too. Powders and chemicals anyone could buy if they knew where to look. He spent hours in the garage with the door cracked open. The air always smelled sharp and bitter, like burnt matches and metal. I'd hear little pops now and then. Not explosions, just quick, tight sounds. Testing, he said, timing things, seeing how colors mixed. Sometimes I'd stand nearby while he lit one off, explaining what he was trying to do. His voice would get fast and excited, like he couldn't get the ideas out quickly enough. Looking back, that was the last time it felt normal. After a few months, things got louder. The pops turned into booms. The booms started shaking the windows just enough to notice. Not enough to complain, but enough to make you pause and think, was that thunder? Then Evan started keeping the garage door closed. That might not sound like much, but it was strange for him. He liked showing off. Suddenly, if I asked what he was working on, he'd shrug and say stuff like, just adjusting formulas, or big project coming up. His smile stopped reaching his eyes. Money started getting tight. Evan didn't say it outright, but I could tell. Bills stacked up on the counter. Late notices. He started pacing a lot, rubbing his hands together, chewing on his nails until they bled. Still, the packages kept coming. Bigger this time, heavier. Thick crates with strange warning symbols and labels covered in long chemical names. I asked him once if he was okay. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Yeah, just investing in the future. One afternoon, I walked past the garage and noticed the door wasn't fully shut, just an inch or two open. I don't know why I looked. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. Inside, the garage didn't look like a hobby space anymore. There were plastic tubs stacked against the walls, some marked with faded writing, others with nothing but numbers. Cardboard boxes sealed with thick tape. A few were torn just enough for me to see rows of brick-shaped packages wrapped in plastic. The shelves were crowded with jars, bottles, and containers of every size. Some had labels. Some didn't. It felt wrong, heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stepped inside and cleared my throat. Evan jumped like I'd slapped him. Didn't hear you? He said, way too fast. I nodded toward the boxes. You expecting to open a warehouse in here or something? He avoided my eyes. New materials. Better quality. From where? Overseas, he said. Cheaper. That was the end of the conversation. He turned his back to me, and I knew better than to push. After that, we barely talked. He was always moving things. Buckets, bags, sealed containers. Sometimes late at night, I'd hear metal scraping or something heavy being dragged across concrete. Once, around midnight, I saw him outside using a heat gun on clear tubing filled with gray powder. His hands were shaking so badly, I thought he might drop it. That's when the fear crept in. Not the sudden kind, the slow kind. The kind that crawls up your spine and settles there. Later, I found out he'd been spending hours on sketchy online forums, not the normal fireworks groups. Dark places full of people sharing instructions for building things that weren't meant to be built at home. They talked about power, pressure, blast radius, like they were comparing engines instead of explosives. Evan stopped talking about fireworks being beautiful. He started talking about them being strong. One night, I saw him dragging a dented metal drum into the garage. He had thick gloves on and a respirator hanging from his neck. He looked tired, hollow. I joked, trying to lighten the mood. "You sure you know what you're doing?" He didn't look at me. I've got the formulas. That word again. Formulas. Like it was some magic spell that kept him safe. The sound that finally broke everything came on a hot afternoon while I was fixing a chair on the porch. It wasn't a bang. It was deeper. A low, chest-hitting boom that felt like it punched the air out of me. The ground vibrated. The garage door was still closed, but the smell hit me right away. Sharp, metallic, burning plastic, and something sour I couldn't place. I opened the side door. The garage looked like a nightmare. Containers everywhere. Powder spilled across the floor. Notes taped to the walls, covered in numbers and scribbles. Evan stood in the middle of it, coughing into a rag, eyes red and streaming. He looked at me, and I swear, in that moment, he already looked dead. "This is crazy," I said. "You're going to kill yourself." "I know what I'm doing," he said, but his voice cracked. Badly. I thought about calling someone. Fire department, police, anyone. I didn't. I told myself it was family business. That he'd figure it out. A week later, Briar Hollow learned how wrong I was. The explosion came in the middle of the afternoon. Windows rattled. Alarms screamed. I ran outside to see the garage engulfed in flames, thick black smoke rolling into the sky. Smaller pops echoed inside, like the building was chewing itself apart. Evan lay on the driveway, clothes smoking, skin burned and blistered. He didn't move. Firefighters kept their distance at first. The heat was unreal. Paramedics took him away, barely breathing. He died 2 days later. The Back in 2016, I was sharing a tiny apartment with my cousin Mara. We weren't close growing up, but life has a way of pushing people together when they're broke. We lived just outside a fading industrial town called Red Willow, the kind of place where warehouses outnumber grocery stores and everything smells faintly like oil and dust. Mara had this restless energy. She was always chasing some idea, some side hustle, some way to make quick money without getting stuck in a normal job. I was the cautious one. I worked nights at a 24-hour diner off the highway, pouring coffee for truckers and pretending I didn't notice how tired everyone looked, including me. Mara's latest idea was reselling specialty supplies online. At first, it sounded boring. Small bottles of chemicals, solvents, and reagents that hobbyists and small labs couldn't easily buy. Nothing explosive, nothing traumatic. Just stuff people needed for obscure projects. We ordered small batches, never enough to raise attention. Our buyers were regulars, quiet people. Some worked out of garages. Some ran tiny labs. Some never explained what they were doing at all. They just paid on time and didn't ask questions. Our apartment quickly turned into a disaster. The kitchen table vanished under boxes. The bathroom counter was lined with tiny bottles. The air always smelled faintly sharp, like cleaning fluid mixed with metal. It should have bothered me more than it did, but there was something exciting about it too. We felt clever, independent, like we were beating the system somehow. Every once in a while, I'd ask if what we were doing was legal. Mara would laugh and wave me off. "Paperwork stuff," she'd say. "Licenses, permits. Nobody cares unless you're moving huge amounts." That answer never really settled right in my chest, but I let it go. After a few months, Mara started spending hours on private message boards. Not the normal ones. The kind that looked unfinished, full of gray backgrounds and usernames made of numbers. That's where she found something better, or so she thought. One night, she came home buzzing with excitement. "I found a supplier," she said, dropping her bag on the floor. "Crazy cheap. Like, doesn't make sense cheap." She told me it was a specialized reagent used in electronics manufacturing. Micro-level stuff. Harmless, according to her. Just rare. The price alone makes it worth it, she said. This could cover rent for months. I asked where it was coming from. She shrugged. Overseas. Maybe surplus stock. Who knows? I didn't like that answer either. The shipment arrived 2 weeks later, delivered not to our apartment, but to a small storage unit we rented on the edge of town. It was an old concrete building with flickering lights and a long hallway that echoed when you walked. We kept bigger orders there, so our landlord wouldn't get suspicious. I was already inside when Mara showed up with the box. We cut it open right there on the dusty floor. Inside weren't the plastic containers we expected. Instead, there were thin glass vials, tightly packed in foam. No clear brand labels. Just strange symbols and faded codes printed directly onto the glass. They didn't look new. They looked reused. Or recovered. I remember feeling a cold prickle up my arms. Mara picked one up and squinted at it. Probably some off-brand manufacturer, she said, though she didn't sound as confident as usual. Doesn't matter. The buyer won't care. We got to work transferring the vials into protective cases. The storage unit was quiet, except for the hum of the overhead light and a distant sound of traffic outside. Then it happened. One vial slipped in Mara's hand. It didn't fall far. Just a short drop. But the glass cracked with a sharp, ugly sound that echoed in the small space. A thin line split down the side, and a thick, oily liquid slowly seeped out. It didn't drip like water. It clung. It moved slowly, like it was thinking about where to go. A tiny bead landed on Mara's glove. She cursed and jerked her hand back. Damn it! The liquid soaked straight through the glove, vanishing like it had been swallowed. She ripped the glove off and stared at her hand. There was nothing there. No burn, no redness, just normal skin. She went to the sink at the end of the unit and rinsed her hand under cold water. "Feels fine," she said. "See? No big deal. I wanted to stop everything right there. Throw the whole box out. Lock the door and walk away. But we didn't. We were tired. We were broke. And the buyer was waiting. We wrapped the cracked vial in layers of plastic and packed it with the rest. That night, I barely slept. The apartment felt wrong. Too quiet. I kept thinking I smelled something faint and metallic, even though everything was sealed and stored away. The next morning, Mara looked pale. Not sick, exactly. Just drained. "Did you sleep?" I asked. She shrugged. "Not really." Weird dreams. She didn't say what they were about. By midday, she started sweating for no reason. The room wasn't hot, but her shirt clung to her back. She kept rubbing her palm, the same hand that had touched the liquid. There was a dark patch there now, not purple like a bruise, more gray, like a shadow under her skin. I tried to joke about it. "Maybe you're allergic." She didn't smile. That night, the dark color spread. It crept up her wrist in thin lines, following her veins. They looked darker too, like someone had drawn them with ink from the inside. She said her arm felt heavy, like it didn't belong to her anymore. The next day, she could barely stand. Her hand was swollen. Her skin looked blotchy and wrong, like it didn't fit her body properly. I begged her to see a doctor. She refused. "They'll ask questions," she said. "I'll be fine." She wasn't. By evening, she was shaking. Her legs trembled when she stood. She threw up anything she tried to eat. When she nearly collapsed in the hallway, I didn't ask anymore. I dragged her to the car and drove straight to the clinic. The doctor took one look at her hand and asked what she'd been exposed to. We didn't know. They ran tests, blood work, everything came back clean. No infection, no known toxins. They sent us home with fluids and instructions to rest. That was a mistake. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of retching. Mara was bent over the sink, vomiting violently. Her skin was so pale, it almost glowed in the bathroom light. Her arm was shaking uncontrollably. The dark veins had spread past her elbow now, thick and raised. We